Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, the podcast for church leaders who want to make a difference in their communities. We're your hosts, Tony Marr and Bruce Montgomery, and we're excited to be with you today. On this podcast, we'll be discussing the latest trends, strategies, and ideas for effective leadership in small-sized churches. So whether you're a pastor, a ministry leader, or a volunteer, this podcast is for you. Each week, we'll bring you interviews with experienced church leaders who have valuable insights to share. We'll also explore topics like team building, community outreach, spiritual growth, and much more. So if you're looking for practical advice and inspiration to help you lead your church with excellence, you've come to the right place. The Small Church Podcast is brought to you by Hire Ministries. Hire Ministries is an organization that exists to help Christian leaders in the churches they serve through coaching and consulting, all for little or no cost. For more information on Hire Ministries or to find out more about the Small Church Podcast, please visit hireministries.com. Thanks for tuning into this week's edition of the Small Church Podcast. Good morning and welcome to this edition of the Small Church Podcast. I'm Tony Marr and I'm here with my good friend and co-host Bruce Montgomery. Bruce, you're not here with me at Aunt B's this morning.
No, I'm not. I'm missing the smoke.
Bruce is on location this morning, but he is here with us audioly and in spirit. Bruce, how are you this morning?
I'm doing really well. I've kind of rushed around this morning and things and feeling bad that I can't be with you there in the studio. But I'm eager to hear what Greg has to say for us today.
Yeah. So, Bruce, over the course of the last week, yesterday, our second episode of the Small Church Podcast dropped on all of your favorite podcasting platforms like Google Podcast, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio. And Bruce, last week we were joking that we had a whole 3 listeners to episode 1. I am proud to announce that we not only hit double digits on listeners and subscribers, but we had nearly 30 listens to our podcast yesterday. So for all of those of you out there that have listened to our latest episode on repeat, my kids and my wife and myself, thank you for all of that. For anyone out there that maybe is new to the Small Church Podcast, this is your first episode or you just discovered us, we would love to connect with you. You can visit us at hireministries.com or go to Facebook and find Hire Ministries. Connect with us there or whatever platform you're listening to this on. There are many different ways for you to connect, ask questions. We would love to respond to you over the course of the show. Thanks for being a part of this. Bruce, you are not here with us.
Incredible numbers, Tony. I have to interrupt. I'm amazed because I only voted twice.
Did you listen to the same one both times?
Honestly, I did. I couldn't figure out how to get the second one.
Well, Bruce,
so I'm still a learner.
This is a big milestone for us on episode 3 of the Small Church Podcast because we have our first in-studio guest with us. Our guest this morning is someone that I have admired for a long, long time, someone that I've known for, probably about 20 years now, I would say. And over the time that I've been in the Tri-Cities area involved with church ministry here, our guest this morning has been a staple in the Tri-Cities Christian community. He's been a leader of many different groups and organizations, all while serving faithfully at his church. And so we are excited and honored to welcome to the Small Church Podcast our guest today, Pastor Greg Key. Greg, how are you doing this morning?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. So honored to have you here. Greg, why don't you take just a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how long you've been in ministry, in church ministry, and some of the passions and areas that you have for the church.
I grew up in Georgia, and my plans wasn't to go into ministry. I went to Georgia Tech my first year of college, studying architecture.
But you wanted to build churches you wanted to build churches physically instead of spiritually.
Yeah, we'll go that way. So my plan was to be an architect. And at the end of my freshman year, I just thought I needed some spiritual nourishment and transferred to Johnson Bible College with the plans of just going for a year. And 4 years later, I graduated. And I still planned on going into architecture, but the doors just closed. And so I just prayed long and hard that summer and just felt God leading me to ministry.
Huh.
So took my first church in a small 50, about average 50 up in northeast Tennessee in Johnson County in Shady Valley.
Shady Valley, beautiful area up there.
So I've been in ministry 35 years now.
35 years. What has been, you say, your journey over the last 35 years? How many different churches have you worked in? How many different leadership? What's your role been in those churches over the course of the 35 years? Kind of take us through your timeline.
Well, I started at Harmon I was actually hired as the youth minister, and they hired me to replace the preacher when he retired, and he was there another 6 months and retired, and so I was there a total of 3.5 years. I then went to Boone and was youth minister, and I was there about 1.5 years. And then we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where I went to Southern Baptist, and I did an interim youth ministry there for 1 year. And I've been in Elizabethton since. So
All right.
been there for 26 years.
Wow.
But again, I was hired as youth minister
In
at
Elizabethton?
In Elizabethton. And a couple of the elders had said, what we're really looking for is somebody to replace the minister when he retires. And I thought that might be 5 years. It ended up being 1 year.
Oh, wow.
But so I've been there 26 years, almost 2 of those as youth minister.
So you thought that you would have 5 years to prepare for your role,
Right.
and then a year in, you get thrust into this. Did you feel equipped for that? Did you feel overwhelmed, over your head?
No, I felt ready. I mean, because I'd been in ministry for several years, and I'd done my MDiv, and as far as the education goes, I was ready, and I'd preached before at Harmon, so yeah, I was ready, and felt like that's the reason I was there anyway.
Yeah.
It just came sooner than I had expected.
God was preparing you
Yes,
all
yes.
that time.
Oh, yes, very much.
So you've been there for, you said 20, how many years now?
26.
26 years at Westside. A lot of ebb and flow.
Oh, yeah.
In what's happened there. How have you, in 26 years of staying at the same church in Carter County, Tennessee, which isn't a booming metropolis
No.
of a community, what has kept you motivated for 26 years to keep going?
Because I really feel that this is where God wants me to be. I had looked for a year when I finished seminary study at Southern. I had looked for a church for a year where I would preach, where I'd minister, where there's youth or preaching, and just wasn't finding anything. And after a while, you just start like throwing spaghetti against the wall. You just send out resumes hoping something's going to stick. And so I sent the resume to Westside in Elizabethton, and not figuring I would get the position. I mean, it's 6 miles from Milligan College and Emmanuel, and so they got all kinds of graduates. I figured the chances of them hiring me would be pretty slim. But a month later, I got a call from the preacher and said, "Are you still looking?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you like to preach?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "When can you come up for an interview?" And after that phone call, I just felt God telling me, this is where you're going to be. This is your position to lose, and that you will be preaching. And I didn't, I had no idea that the preacher was going to retire in a year.
Yeah.
But I felt God leading me there. And I have felt that calling, ever since. And so when things got difficult, it's still, because you have problems wherever you go, what doesn't
Sure,
matter
of
the
course.
size. But I still feel, that this is where God has called me. During that year of looking, I worked at Chick-fil-A in Covington, Georgia, and it was a great job. It is the only job outside of church work that I thought, I think I could do this for a living as a vocation. And the operator encouraged me to study and become assistant manager. And if I had done that, I probably would have been the manager in a year or two, because the manager left not long after I did. But I just didn't feel that that's what I needed to be doing.
So in 26 years of being at the same church, same community, same group of people, you have a Chick-fil-A within walking distance of your church. Have you ever thought, wow, life would sure be easier if I were just managing a restaurant?
Oh, yeah, but it would certainly be different. Yeah.
One of the things that Bruce and I have said often is that when we're talking with men and women who are thinking about going into the ministry, we say, if there's anything else that you can do and be happy, do it. But if you're truly
I
called to
just wrote that
ministry,
down.
you won't be happy doing anything else.
Right. Yeah, I
Amen.
enjoyed that job, but I just didn't feel like that's what I needed to be doing.
So, Greg, one of the things that we do with this podcast is we're really trying to direct it towards small church leadership. Large churches have a wide variety of resources. A lot of small churches don't have the kind of resources available to them, either because of proximity or because of financial obligations or anything like that. So we're trying to create and really direct this towards the small church. And by small church, we're defining that as an average Sunday attendance of 150 or less. Over the course of the 26 years, has Westside fallen into that category for the majority of the time?
Yeah, most of the time. Most of the time I've been there.
And so with that understanding of what a small church is, what do you think some of the day-to-day common challenges are that you face? And maybe what are some of the particularly challenging things that you deal with on a daily or weekly basis?
Some of them I think are personal, in that, I look at larger churches and some of the things they do, and I think it's true in any area, not just in ministry. You look at what others do and their successes, and it's easy to become jealous and wish you could do those things. It doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter what occupation. If I'd stayed at Chick-fil-A and I was the manager there, and we were making X amount a year, I could look at another.
Sure. Always playing the comparison.
And I wish
game.
I was doing as well as they could. They were. So, I look at larger churches and see the ministries, see the things that they're able to do that we're not, because we're smaller. And so part of it is just personal.
One of the things that has always really impressed me about you, going back 20 years ago to when I first met you, is the way that you don't view your call to ministry just to that specific local congregation, those four walls, floors, and ceilings that you have there at Westside. But you have always been very, very active in the community and working with other church leaders in helping to spread the gospel beyond just the walls of your church. Do you feel like that gives you that sense of purpose and meaning beyond just the label of a small church pastor?
Right. Yes. I think I had, I guess, as a mentor early when I was at Westside, a preacher had moved to a church on the other side of town, and we would meet regularly. And I remember one of the things that he said he did was that he wanted to spend a day doing service outside of the church. He expected his members to be serving, and so he always wanted to be serving outside of the church as well, as Christian service, not just work, and with the congregation. And so that example helped. One of the things he did when he was in Elizabethton was help start a chaplaincy with the police department that he just really enjoyed. And so finding something outside of the congregation, because anything you do with the congregation is always part of your work.
Right.
Even if you enjoy it, it's still part of your work.
Absolutely.
And so you need something, some kind of ministry that you're just volunteering. And so, yeah, I've always tried to do that.
So with all those different things that you're involved with, and all of the responsibilities that come with being the pastor of a small church. And let's be honest, a small church pastor's job is I would say more demanding than that of someone in a larger church, because you wear
Yeah.
so many different hats. We talked about this last week, that if you're the lead pastor, the senior minister in a large church, your task list, your responsibility list is not that large oftentimes. It's, do some leadership, some vision casting stuff, staff leadership, but you're not responsible for all of the things that a small church pastor typically is. So with all of the things that are weighing on you, all of the different responsibilities that you have, all of the demands that you have in your work within your church, how does that line up with the things that you enjoy doing and the responsibilities that you have in your life outside of your role as the senior minister of Westside Christian Church?
Do what? I just try to find, to make sure it's not crowding out those things that are important to me. I give time to the church, but I just try to make sure I carve out time for things outside of the church.
Yeah.
It's easy if you're not planning and making sure those priorities to let the urgent take over, the tyranny of the urgent, to let those urgent things take over. And so I make a priority of those things outside. It's not that I neglect the things inside the congregation that I need to do, but make sure that I've made time for those outside.
Do you ever get any pushback on that, on the things that you do outside of the church from those within the church?
I've never received that.
That's great.
Now I've heard of preachers who have,
Yeah.
but I've never. Yeah.
How do you?
So
How
I've
would
been.
you say,
That part's been a blessing at Westside.
for someone listening who does have that pushback, because a lot of guys that we've talked with, that we've worked with, do have that pushback, what advice would you give them on how to deal with that within their leadership?
Well, since I've never had to do that, to deal with that at Westside, I guess just help them to understand that you need that. I mean, giving to others helps you. And so having that time outside is beneficial to you. It makes you healthier for the congregation.
And I also think there's a kingdom aspect to it, that
Yeah.
that so many times our leadership in the church is so inwardly focused that we only see your responsibility is to this handful, this group of people that call this their home church, when really, if we could change the paradigm, if we could change our perspective to seeing that we're just a small portion of the larger body of Christ, the kingdom of God as a whole. And so your work for the kingdom as a servant of the kingdom isn't just defined within the walls of this specific congregation.
Right. And that's a good part of it too.
One of the big struggles that I think a lot of small churches have is the lack of resources. It's one of the big reasons why we're doing this ministry, this podcast, and resources in a lot of different areas. But I want to spend just a minute talking about some of the financial constraints that oftentimes small churches have. I can remember having been a pastor in a large church for several years. The first time that I was in a leadership position within a smaller church and talking with the leadership and going through their budget, I was shocked that their entire church budget was what our children's ministry budget was at the church that I had previously been at. And talking with them about all these things that they could do in a strategic planning session, all these different things that they could do, and then saying, that's great, how do we pay for that? That's great, how do we pay for that? That's great, how do we afford that? And so how do you navigate some of those financial constraints in your church? And what strategies have you found in 26 years of working at your church that help you to be effective in utilizing the resources that you have to their maximum ability and maybe generating other means of resources?
Well, I think one important consideration is that I'm cheap. My brother always criticized me for being cheap. So I don't like spending money, so that's not an issue because I don't like spending money anyway. But I've also been able to find, especially with the internet, being able to find free resources. So this year,
Good.
our vacation Bible school, we're using Grow Curriculum or Stuff I Can Use. I'm trying to remember what the website is. They're both the same, and I think you can find it on either one. And they offer free 4-day vacation Bible school lessons. And so we used that last year. We're using it again this year. And so there's the material, and we're getting it for free.
That's incredible. Yeah, I was meeting with a church leader the other day, and they were looking for their VBS curriculum, and they were just shocked at what the typical go-tos, what they
Yeah.
cost now,
Right.
even for just the digital version. And they said, well, I guess I'm going to go up into the church attic and look for the 25 years of old stuff that we have. And so having a resource that you found that is free, could you tell us again, for anyone listening who may be saying, wow, that would be great to have a new updated curriculum that's free of charge? What is that website that you went to?
It's Grow Curriculum or Stuff I Can Use. I think but it's definitely Grow Curriculum.
Grow Curriculum.
And they've got 4 different ones to pick from.
That's great. That will be a huge benefit and resource to someone out there.
So we've
listening.
done things like that. Or we've borrowed from a church that did something different last year. We didn't do it, so it's new to us. And we've done that in the past.
So collaborating with other churches, with other ministries in your area, that's
Right.
wonderful.
But there's all kinds of free stuff and that you can use to work around.
But to do that collaboration, you have to have a relationship with other churches and other ministers.
Right.
How have you gone about cultivating that over the years?
There is a group of ministers that I meet with weekly, and that's helpful, building friendships, and we call it group counseling, and so it's good. It's good mentally and emotionally, just being able to share the frustrations and
for someone who's
hardships.
cheap, it's free.
And it's free, yeah.
Better than going to the real counseling.
Oh, yeah. Cheap group counseling. And so we build relationships with that. I think a blessing is that in Carter County, we still have a strong men's fellowship. And so we meet together monthly with area churches in the county. And so get to know ministers that way and men from those congregations. And so those are helpful for building relationships.
Yeah, definitely. That help you not to feel so isolated and alone in your
Right.
ministry.
Yeah, and I definitely would encourage ministers to try and meet with other ministers on a regular basis. And now we meet weekly, but even if it's just monthly, it's helpful. It's beneficial to be able to see that others are struggling, to get advice from others. It's a good outlet.
That's great.
Can't encourage it enough.
Speaking of being isolated and alone, one of the greatest lack of resources that I think small church leaders have is people power. The lack of people to actually help you with the many different hats, many different responsibilities that you wear. And this isn't just an issue that's unique to the small church. I think this is any organization has a difficult time finding volunteers and help for the things that they need to do. But especially in a small church, it can be difficult. And when you look at the old adage that 10% of the people do 90% of the work, if your numbers are smaller, that 10% gets even smaller. And so 26 years of being in the same place, you've had a lot of experience in dealing with recruiting, engaging, training, building up volunteers. How have you gone about that, and what advice would you give to a small church leader listening who's just struggling to recruit and retain volunteers?
Well, like you said, I have to wear many hats. A lot of different jobs that I'm doing that wouldn't be required if I was at a larger church. And so even the volunteers are often required to wear many hats. And so you've got your volunteers doing several different jobs in the church. And I guess what's most necessary is not to overwork them, is to pay close attention so that they're not being overworked and just wearing out.
How do you keep from burning out your volunteers?
Making sure you're not asking them to do 10 things, giving them time off, making sure that when they start, if they volunteer for something, that this isn't a lifelong commitment.
Amen.
Because sometimes it is, or at least churches think, you volunteered to teach the Sunday school class and you're going to be teaching it till you die. Right.
Yep.
So to make sure that, up front, look, this is what I'm asking, this term of commitment, can you do this for a year? And at the end of the year, reevaluate. Would you like to continue? Do we need to find somebody else? But something else is that you need to pray. We need to pray. One of the areas that we've struggled with is musicians. And there have been times when we're not supposed to do this, but there have been times when I've worried. I think there's a verse about that, worrying something. Anyway, and I've worried about that. I mean, I've prayed, but I've been worried that are we going to have a musician? What's going to happen in 6 months? Because I know, this pianist she's been talking about arthritis. She wanted to quit 5 years ago. The only reason she's able to do it now is because of new medications, and she's not going to be able to play much longer. And when she retires, when she doesn't play anymore, there is no one else.
Yep.
At least that's what right now it looks like. We didn't have anybody, but just praying for that. And sure enough, before she retired, we had someone else had stepped up, and they were taking turns, and then the first one retired, and this second one moved right into that position. And so what I've seen over the years is God provides. And I can't predict how God's going to provide. I can't predict who that next person's going to be, what it's going to look like, but God has provided. And I just have to pray, ask God. You have not because you ask not. Pray, trusting that God will indeed provide. He's called us. He has a plan for this congregation. Music's important. Other areas are important. And so you need those workers. You can't do it all. And so you just pray and trust God that he will provide. And occasionally something won't have somebody. All right, we'd like to do this. There's no one to do it. All right, we don't do it right now.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do it next year or in 5 years, but we can't do it right now because we don't have the personnel to do it.
So how do you deal with the, I guess maybe disappointment of there's something that you want to do, there's no one to do it, and so we can't do it right now. It needs to wait. I think oftentimes there's the potential for us to say, okay, I really feel this needs to happen. There's nobody to do it, so I'm just going to do it. And then what ends up happening is then you become resentful and you escalate your burnout clause in your contract. Yeah. And so is that a hard balance for you to say, we just need to shelve it for now until we can find someone, as opposed to saying, okay, I really believe in this, so I'm just going to take it on myself?
Right. Yeah, that's always an issue. And another issue, another side effect is that if you do it all, the church becomes dependent on you.
Right, yeah.
And then when you leave this huge void because you've been doing all of these jobs. And so there's no way for them to fill all those things.
Do you have an example of a story to tell of a time where there was something that you really felt that needed to happen and just had to be put on hold because there wasn't the resources to pull it off?
No, I have a worse example of me doing it. I guess the area right now we're kind of struggling. We're still working on is the sound booth. So you've got the mixer, you've now got the computer because you're running the projector or TV screens, and now you've got streaming. We just keep adding jobs back there. Or when I got to Westside, this was hilarious. When I got to Westside, we had the sound system was in a cabinet in the choir loft. They turned it on before the service started. They turned it off when the service was over, and that was it. And if you had special music, somebody went up there and turned the tape on. We were still running cassette tapes, and we didn't have a CD player. And turned the mic on, and then when it was over, turned it off. But that was it. Other than that, the sound system wasn't touched for the entire service. And now, we got all kinds of channels that are being used every week. And again, the computer, the video camera, so much more. And I came to a position, especially during COVID, when, in those 2 months that we weren't meeting, well, I've got to be there. We're introducing some new software because we're streaming, and I was the only one who knew how to do it. Well, in that case, that had to be done, and so I did it. That wasn't something you could wait 5 years for.
Correct, yeah.
We needed to be streaming, and so we did, but I was the only one who knew. So it's been a challenge to get recruits and train them, and we've done okay at that, but we're doing a little bit better now.
Good.
So that I'm not the only one. But there was a point, if I had left, something had happened to me, no one else knew what was going on.
Have you ever left something not done just to, I guess, maybe make the point that here's what happens when nobody volunteers for this?
Yeah, I guess that would be one. When I leave, I'm on vacation. Look, y'all got to know what's going on. And so when those first couple of years, I'd get a call on vacation. How do you turn this on? How do you get this video started? How do you start streaming?
Yeah.
And so they'd call me up, and they learned the hard way. Look, we got to have somebody doing that. And so I was unlocking the building, and so they've got a regular rotation. I mean, I'm there when they're unlocking the building, but somebody needs to be there who knows what to do. What lights need to be turned on, what doors need to be unlocked. Somebody other than me needs to know how to do this so that when I'm on vacation, if something happens, someone else knows how to do it.
Yeah, my wife is a big fan of podcasts. Not this one, but she's a big fan of other podcasts. And
Maybe she will be soon.
we were,
not this one?
Not this one. We were actually
But
just
it's new.
talking. It's new. That's right. We were talking just yesterday about a podcast that she's listening to with a woman whose husband died unexpectedly, and she didn't know what to do. She didn't know passwords to access bank accounts.
Yeah,
she
that's
didn't
it.
know what to, and so she was talking about the importance of having a letter, a book of here's everything that you need to know. Probably a good idea for small church pastors to have something like that in the event that they're out of town or something happens to them, that they're in the hospital for something, or they have a family emergency and need to be gone, that people know how to keep the ship sailing.
Yeah, that's right. So we're working on it.
Working on
it. We're working on getting more people. I got one or two, but we need 4. Once a week would be great if we could get, somebody different on the sound system every week, just so that they can stay in the habit of doing it. Because if you only do it once a year, you don't remember.
Yeah.
Right.
Greg, one of the big issues that I think we see with a lot of small churches is that many small churches have a real family aspect to them, that they're dominated by 2 or 3 families, that this has been their church since, even if you've been there 26 years, their family has been there much longer. And great granddad used to be the preacher here. And these 2 or 3 families, it's almost a family reunion every Sunday. That they come, they see each other, they catch up, and then they all leave and go to Cracker Barrel after service. And so for anyone coming in to the church that's outside of those families, someone new, it can really feel closed off. How do you build a sense of community in your church that new people coming in feel included, they feel loved, they feel welcomed and valued.
Yeah, we really struggled with that. I think because I could see that happening, and uh, and so one of the things we've done is we have a monthly fellowship meal. So on Sunday nights, that is the service. We still have Sunday night and Wednesday night services, and on Sunday night, so first Sunday night of the month, we'll have a potluck meal, and people are bringing in whatever they want. We'll have a different menu each month. So this month, last Sunday, it was sandwiches and salads, and the month before, I think maybe in soup and chili. We'll have different menus, but you don't get to know each other in a worship service when you're sitting, staring at somebody's back. There's not a lot of time to visit. And so those fellowship meals are needed because those are times when you can sit together and just visit. There's no agenda. You're just sitting together for 30, 45 minutes visiting. And so those are good times to help incorporate and build new people in and get to know each other because you're sitting talking. You can share backgrounds. You can share stories. And so
do your new people come to that?
Yes. Yeah, well, most do. Yes. I got one family in particular.
That's an extra step.
I've got one family in particular that I'm trying to get to come. They haven't come yet, and they've been with us for about a year. But yeah, we need to get them to do that because we need to get to know them, and they need to get to know us.
Yeah,
and it's easier to minister when you know others. When you
Right.
know them, and then you're more likely to know their needs, and it's a lot easier to help with those needs.
yeah. So, Greg, 26
Even-
years. 26 years
Yeah.
at the same church, 26 years in leadership, and well, more than that, 35 years in church leadership. What are some of the most important lessons that you've learned about leadership in the last 35 years that you've served, 26 years in the same church? And how have those lessons that you've learned help you address the unique challenges of small church leadership?
Well, going back to really what we said earlier and talking about volunteers, it's trusting God and then some patience. Patience has not been one of my strengths. I hope I'm doing better at that because I like it. I think of it, and we need it, so let's do it yesterday. I don't want to wait 6 months, but what I've seen is that our leadership is often very slow at making decisions, painfully slow at making a decision. We just got a color copier.
All right.
And we've had black and white, and we now have a color copier, and it only took 6 months to make that decision. I mean, I had the numbers, the facts. This is going to be cheaper. Our old one was getting so old, it was getting expensive because of the age. And so it was going to be cheaper to get this new one, and it still took 6 months. And so it's just having the patience. Look, they're going to take time. And so knowing that, I knew it was going to take months, so I didn't worry about it. And that's it. It's just understanding in advance. This is the way it works. You wish it could work a little faster, but it doesn't. So having that patience and trusting God, that God is going to work things out and that He's going to provide what's needed when it's needed. And again, you don't know how that's going to work, when it's going to take place, but trusting that God will do that, that He'll provide the leaders that you need when you need it. I'd like a couple more elders.
Yeah.
We don't have them right now, but we do have a couple of elders. I'd like some more. And so I just keep praying and trusting that God will build up those men who will step into those positions. when in His timing.
Yeah.
Because His timing's much better than my timing.
Yeah. Greg, one of the things that we have the opportunity in higher ministries to work with a lot of young people, a lot of men and women that are getting ready to graduate or have just recently graduated Bible college or seminary. And one of the big issues that we're seeing is that it used to be the kind of trajectory that you would take is you would get a job in a local church somewhere, and you would work there, maybe as a youth minister for a couple of years, worship leader a few years, and maybe you would stay there, for long term, or maybe it would be like your story, and you'd quickly get thrust into a different position. But that was typically the trajectory. That was the way that things went for so long. Now what we're seeing with many of our Bible college and seminary graduates is they have no interest in taking jobs at smaller churches. They want to jump straight to the large church. And if they can't get a job right out of Bible college at 22 years old, if they can't get a job as the lead pastor of a church of 6,000 people, then they're going to take a job as an intern or an apprenticeship in a large church. And the trajectory of going to a small church doesn't seem appealing to so many of our young men and women. So what advice would you give to someone who is considering becoming a small church leader? Is they're weighing their options and looking at that as a possibility?
Tony, there's another option people are doing too, working at Starbucks. They just don't do ministry at all.
Very true.
Or Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
I heard recently, I can't remember where I heard this from, but that the majority, like 70 to 80% of all churches in the United States are small churches.
Yes.
Where did I hear that?
You probably heard that on the Small Church Podcast.
I probably heard that on episode 1 of the Small Church Podcast. And so, if you're limiting yourself to larger churches, you just cut off 80% of your
job market.
Your market, of your chances of getting something. I think there's some advantages to small churches.
Absolutely.
I like you said, I have lots of hats, and so I'm doing a number of things. So if I get tired of working on my sermon, I just need a break. There's something else that needs to be done, and I can go work on that, and I'm still being productive because it needs to be done. And so I'm going to do it, and so I can go do that for a few minutes, 30 minutes, come back and start working on my sermon again. And so there's numerous things that I can be involved in. And so I'm building, my experience in more than just one area. What's helped me too, as I've mentioned, is I had a mentor that was, he had a lot more experience than me, and so I'm at this small church, but I'm still getting some feedback and encouragement and advice from another preacher, which would, I think, what most are looking for at a larger church. You're going to be under someone when you're just getting started.
Yeah.
And so you can still get that at a small church. I've got friends at, larger churches in the Tri-Cities, and I'll talk to them occasionally and get some help.
And a lot of times they're dealing with many of the same exact issues that you're dealing with.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just on a different scale,
Yeah.
but it's still the same issues. People are people. It doesn't matter what size the church is.
So, Greg, 26 years at your church, 35 years in ministry. What do you see in looking ahead? What are some of the biggest challenges that you think the church is going to face in the future?
I think the culture is always an issue. The church has always been counter-cultural because the culture doesn't want anything to do with God, and generally, and it's becoming even more so here in our country. And so, there are always those cultural factors that we're dealing with. but we still have to make sure that we're making the main thing, which is preaching the gospel. And so as we go forward, we need to make sure we're still focusing on the gospel, because Jesus is the answer. And so we got to make sure that we're preaching Jesus, making sure that we're focusing on salvation, reaching the lost, because it doesn't matter who it is, they need Jesus. If they don't know him, they need him.
Very true. Well, we are about out of time. This edition of the Small Church Podcast, we want to take a minute and thank our guest, Greg Key, for spending the last 40 minutes with us. Greg, it's been incredible getting to talk with you and hear your insights, your expertise, and your encouragement for other small church leaders. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you would like to hear more from Greg, you can visit higherministries.com, find us on our Facebook page, search Higher Ministries, and connect with him there. Shoot us a line, drop us a question, and join us next week for our next issue of the Small Church Podcast.